48 Prime Minister's Office. Minister Singh was preparing for a meeting with the wartime Prime Minister at the Ministry of Defence office in New Delhi as the captain flew back wearily to the Adampur base. He has two messages for the Prime Minister, one good and one bad. The bad news is that an hour ago, Rosaboronexport suddenly requested to suspend the supply of weapons accessories on the grounds of domestic political pressure. I believe that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs must have presented this matter to the Prime Minister with more enthusiasm. Now Singh needs it. Reversing this passive situation requires the help of the Prime Minister, because Prime Minister Khan and the Russian President have a good personal relationship. He knew that the Duma of the Russian Federation would never stop the export of weapons because Indian planes used Russian bombs to bomb civilian areas by mistake. The Russians have no such tradition, and their real purpose is to raise prices by taking the opportunity. In addition, Singh also has good news. In the past 2 days, the Air Force under his command shot down at least 8 Pakistani fighter jets. It can be confirmed that 2 of them were F-16C/D of the Pakistan Falcon squadron shot down by the air. The myth of American technology that Pakistan has trumpeted has now been ruthlessly busted. This is a major victory. Singh believes that not only Prime Minister Khan will be inspired by it, but the Indian people will also rejoice. Unlike previous cabinet ministers, Singh has always been well aware of the power of public opinion, so his Ministry of Defence not only has the official spokesman for the facade, and a clandestine public affairs office, run by his most trusted official, Luyud Nahan, dealing exclusively with newspapers and television. At present, the war has just started, and the people of the whole country are excited. He needs to constantly rely on the good news from the front line to add another fire. Singh was thinking about the state TV's propaganda plan when Office Chief Luyud Nahan walked in and told him. The phone call agreed between the Prime Minister and the President of the United States has ended, and he is now free to receive him. Singh immediately left the Ministry of Defence on Dalhousie Street with his belongings and headed to the Prime Minister's office in central New Delhi. After the affairs officials informed him, Singh was immediately allowed to enter the office. When he entered the Prime Minister's office, he found that Khan was sitting alone in a daze, looking depressed and very tired. It was obvious that he had hit another nail in the United States. "Your Excellency the Prime Minister, the Minister of Defence is here." A secretary walked over and pulled Khan back to reality from his contemplation. "Okay, my old friend, please take a seat." Khan stood up and greeted Singh to sit down. "Let's talk about our losses in the past 2 days." He then spread his hands and said, as if he was more concerned about his own losses. "Care some." "Your Majesty, our losses are very, very limited. Pakistan is powerless to fight back, they are still attacking military installations with body bombs. And these attacks are in vain other than angering our people." "Well, I know the situation, I always rely on these lousy methods. By the way, Charman told me in the morning that the intelligence he has obtained shows that the mainstream opinions in China are seriously divided. It seems that there are people who sympathize with us. The intellectual class scoffs at traditional geopolitics. We are more inclined to see us as victims of terrorism." "I think so, you better not believe such intelligence. The Chinese seem hesitant on the surface, but this may be a conspiracy, just like in 1962. I think that at the last moment, Nehru thought that the other party would not take military action. In fact, in the first half of 1962, Zhou Enlai and Nehru kept communicating with Nehru to discuss the issue of colonial history. The government thinks the Chinese are wordy and naive, when in fact they are secretly preparing for war. Have you studied their strategy?" "Yes, in 1962, when I was only 4 years old, my family moved from Uttar Pradesh to Mumbai. It's like the end of the world, so I've been studying this country since I was young. Chinese policy makers are not opportunists, even though they're waiting for an opportunity. They're on track, as Charman said. Only in October before, we smashed the massive resistance in Pakistan and re-strengthened the border defenses in the northeast, then, nothing will happen. Are you sure that it is so simple? It is true, everything has to depend on the progress of the ground war. Then just let it go. I think you should know that the international situation our country is facing now is more difficult than in 1998. I remember that year was also the year when the Democratic Party was in power in the United States. I believe that as long as I persevere, when the Republican Party comes to power, it will restore its relationship with the United States. India's traditional diplomatic relations. Everything will be fine. The Prime Minister waved his hand and said that Khan regarded Singh as a confidant, so he directly read what was in his heart. He seemed to put all political planning on the premise of elections in other countries. Superior. Singh did not want to further expand on the relationship between the United States and India. He is an interesting person. He has already guessed that the US President had put a lot of pressure on the Prime Minister on the phone just now, so that Khan suddenly thought of the international situation after the nuclear test in 1998. Sanctions. Your Excellency, Russia has hinted that it will stop the MiG-29 UPG plan, and there is also the issue of weapons accessories. The cargo ship stopped in St. Petersburg has been loaded, but has not received permission to set sail. At present, it is only a written notice from Rosoboronexport, but I mentioned yesterday's accidental bombing. Don't worry too much, it's just common blackmail, I know them too well. I'll call Petrov. Kahan sneered, everything was in his expectation, but came a little faster. Actually, I admire the Russians' attitude towards things. If all countries only value interests like they do, the world will become much more orderly. One more thing. Go ahead. That's what I mentioned to you about the selection of the Army Chief of Staff. Lieutenant General Prasad is playing tricks again. Yes, I saw the offensive plan he submitted today. Is still too conservative. He just took the 1986 plan, Tutu changed it and took it out again. It was a mediocre front-line push plan, and the attack had no point. If this plan was implemented, the army would soon be in the hot desert area. Lose attack speed. We're going to be in a tug of war. What other good candidates do you have? Khan asked casually. In fact, he is very clear in his mind. The most suitable candidate in Singer's mind must be himself. Although he was only the captain when he retired, he has been criticizing the high-level generals in front of him for not being professional enough since he took office. I have a lot of candidates, some young enterprising lieutenants. Some officers who understand modern warfare. Modern warfare? I want to hear your opinion. Pakistan has a lot of armored divisions, and we always put the armored and infantry are grouped together so that they are better suited to fight in Punjab. If we can completely eliminate the Pakistan Air Force interference, the second phase of airstrikes will focus on hitting these armored divisions. Then I need a lot of drones to get in airspace reconnaissance of the other side. But what does this have to do with the replacement of Prasad? He dispatched most of the drone squadrons to the northeastern border area to guard against China, and arbitrarily divided the originally independent drone squads. It was assigned to several mountain divisions, and he now controls them so tightly that I can hardly mobilize the equipment, Singh said. He and the Prime Minister did not meet outsiders, so he spoke very blatantly. Of course Khan could understand that the only thing Singh wanted was to get around the Army Chief of Staff who got in the way, or put an obedient person in this position.